Welcome to the Business of School podcast, brought to you by Cole Connect. Get ready for a journey of topical insights, engaging conversations, and maybe a few aha moments from the business, finance, and technology side of schools. Cole School experts are your host, and with our guests from the world of education, we're about to embark on a learning adventure to support you in the business of your school. Kym has an excess of 25 years' experience in the financial services industry, holds a Bachelor of Business, is a chartered accountant and financial planner. Over the years, Kym has specialised in assisting schools secure and enhance their financial position. Her diverse experience and broad knowledge enable her to create financial strategies to achieve her clients' needs and long-term financial goals. Well, welcome, Kym, to the Business of School podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenton.
It's lovely to have you from the sunny Brisbane. It looks like the weather's good over there at the moment with a Brisbane skyline in your background. Well, we're really looking forward to having a chat today about how schools can manage cash reserves. Absolutely fundamental, important topic for any schools that have to manage that seasonal change, often with cash flow during the year, and as well as being able to keep one eye ahead and manage the long-term cash surpluses. Also, we know from working with schools as well, there's always this distinction between what they can have as operational funds compared with what they've got to put aside for capital projects and buildings on campus. And all of these things with your cash flow reporting and your planning and your strategy all come together in ensuring you have financial sustainability at your school. So really looking forward to sharing the experience and the work that you've done with schools in managing these things. So thank you very much for having the time with us today to do that. So first of all, let's talk about managing cash reserves at a school. What is it that's the biggest challenge then for schools in managing cash reserves?
So I think, schools do a lot of great work in raising the cash from their operational activities or fundraising activities. And then they'll often just have the funds sitting there in a bank account.
Yeah, under the mattress for a rainy day.
Yes, that's right. They'll keep it for a rainy day. There's often, we need to do a bit of planning about what the purpose of those cash funds, do we need to set the funds aside for an operational shortfall that might occur during the year? Are there capital works that are going to occur in the short or long term? Some schools might want to have a scholarship fund, set the funds aside for that, or are they not really earmarked for anything, and then they become a long-term investment reserve for the school?
Yeah. Because I think what we've seen with a lot of schools is there is a reluctance to do anything with the surplus funds, because just in case there's a need, we're going to need that tomorrow, or something happens, or there's a delay in the funding coming through, or there's a slump in enrolments, or there's an unexpected expense. But like you say, if you can identify what it is that you need your funds for going forward, then there's a much better effective way of planning for those surpluses, isn't there?
Absolutely. So, knowing your liquidity requirements really enable you to use those funds to the school's advantage. So, if you know, and just to use a simple example, if you know the funds aren't going to be required for 6 months or 12 months, then you can look at placing the funds into different types of investments that will earn you varying rates of return.
Yeah. And we'll talk about those different ways of investing it, I think, in a moment. It'd be really good to explore that. But one of the things I've just sort of picking up from what you're saying is that there is you need to know what you need the funds for. And there's a whole heap of exercises that need to happen before you can get to that point, and as a school. And these are one of the things that we work closely with schools on. But it stresses the importance of your building master planning. The importance for your cash flow forecasting, going for your long-term forecasting, your enrolment projections, the quality of that data that you're collecting to be able to put into those models, so that you've you've got the right information to make the decisions on. And it's the schools that are better at managing their surpluses and their long-term investments are the ones that have put the effort into those strategic models to really have a good vision of where it is that they're going and what it is then they need to be able to achieve those goals.
Yes, and if you do that work, then it makes it really easy to make the decision about what to do with the excess cash.
Yeah, excellent. So what is it that you're seeing with schools once they've got that information? What are the options available to schools in Australia and New Zealand at the moment to manage those long-term cash reserves?
So I suppose it comes down to a conversation with the school around the purpose of the funds and the risk return and the time frame that they're looking at. So just to use an example, if there were some cash funds that had been earmarked for a scholarship fund, and so you want to maybe invest the capital base for a long term and generate revenue to be able to pay for a scholarship for a child every year, then if you know what the purpose of the funds, that you're not going to be having to access the capital, you just want to use the revenue, then you can look at different types of investment options. So something, I suppose, the least risky investment option that we see schools adopt the most is just having the funds in a cash account. And normally, if there's the board or the investment committee, they don't want to take much risk with the capital because they don't want to feel responsible. If there is pullback in markets, they don't want us to have see any kind of negative return with the investments of the school. So we generally see that the amounts are remaining in cash only or maybe a term deposit. But then those type of investments yield the lowest amounts for the school. So I suppose to use a very, very simple example, I've seen a lot of schools where they have funds just sitting in a check account, earning absolutely no interest or earnings whatsoever. And just a simple example, if we knew that, we don't need those funds for another 12 months, putting them in a 1-year term deposit these days will earn you 5%. You're able to generate more funds for the school and use those for the purpose that they're required for.
So really, another stage that the executive, the leadership of the school need to go through is to decide what is their risk appetite for each of the needs they have for long-term cash surpluses. And so then you can work with them to help them understand in their portfolio what it is that they're investing each of the monies into.
Mm. And if you've gone through that work at the beginning, then there's normally a few different pools that are identified, and then each one of those pools will have different liquidity requirement, different timing, and so therefore there's a different risk profile, because the longer you are able to invest for, the more risk you can take with the investing, and therefore the higher long-term investment return will be achieved.
Okay. And are you seeing many schools adopt a formal investment policy to enhance that governance decision-making process?
It's generally where there are longer-term investment reserves. The investment policy will deal with things like the spending policy, the time horizons, really enhances the governance of the school. So sets out the roles and responsibilities of the board. Sometimes, depending on the amount of work required, there might be a separate investment committee. and then they're on an ongoing basis looking at those different pools.
So that's like a subcommittee to the finance committee.
Yes. So, and sometimes it is the finance committee that takes on that responsibility, or they may choose to have a completely separate investment committee.
Yeah, and that committee is not just looking at the investment of those funds now, it's looking at the before and after as well. It's going through that risk assessment, it's making sure the ducks in a row in the reporting and the models are being done so they can make the right decisions, and then understanding what reporting is needed following that to be able to manage that long-term investment and to report back to the stakeholders.
Yes. So it's really important not to just sort of put their investment strategy in place. It's not a set and forget type of procedure. So, and part of the investment policy would be setting things down like ranges of your asset allocation, any screens where you want to maybe exclude certain types of investments, and then on an ongoing basis, looking at the performance of the investments, any updates that are required, and benchmarking against similar types of investments so that you can make sure that you're achieving adequate returns.
Yep. Okay. And we're not just always talking about long-term investments with schools, just because of the funding cycle in the school calendar. There's quite often in most schools there's a period of time where there's a lot of money that's coming in that's surplus to immediate requirements. So, what are you seeing schools do with investment policies around the shorter term surpluses that they may have, and how they manage that during the school year?
So it depends if that sort of thing happens on an ongoing basis. So, and the timing of collection of school fees or the timing of grants that are received by the schools over the year.
So when you say an ongoing basis, do you mean like that's a reoccurring thing at a similar time each year?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what do schools do with those situations? Because that would be quite common across most schools.
Yes. So, and that's your cash flow exercise where you should know when you are going to be collecting that cash from the school fees, and then when you require it when it's a short term, it's generally because it's required operationally across the course of the year. So then it comes down to you wouldn't be looking at anything that has any kind of growth aspect. So you're looking at your different cash deposits and making sure that you're earning the maximum amount of interest that you can on those deposits, and also being able to access them when you need them.
And so, just out of interest, like, what's the most popular investment product around for long-term funds at the moment with schools? Is there anything that is it in fashion at the moment with schools?
So the sort of thing that we look at a lot is a portfolio that has a blend of different asset classes within it. So if you think your growth type of investments are things like Australian equities, international equities, property and infrastructure, and then defensive type of investments, fixed Australian or international fixed interest, things like bonds or cash deposits. The different asset classes behave differently depending on what's happening in the markets. So ideally, what you want to do is blend all of those asset classes into one portfolio, and then you can even out the returns over time. So the sort of thing that we generally recommend for schools is something with a middle of the road sort of risk profile, but with a blend of all of those asset classes, so you're smoothing the return.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's good. And are we seeing a trend towards socially responsible investing and more and more?
Definitely. So there's been a lot of media coverage on the green investing.
Pretty popular with schools and not for profits.
Yes, and then if you take that one step further, it can be called ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance aspects to investing. So generally, and that there are a lot of things that can be included or excluded from an investment portfolio. And depending on the type of organisation, they want to include or exclude different things. So generally for schools, we excluding maybe tobacco, alcohol, and armament.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. It's good to see that's happening within the sector, and people are moving a lot more towards those types of investments, which is what you'd expect. I'm actually curious to understand a little bit more about, as financial advisors, when Findex get requested by a school to come in and help them with this process and to have a look at their cash surpluses. What would be the typical process that you do with school leadership to help them through that?
So generally, we're sitting down with the business manager, the finance committee, and I suppose we have a look at the financials first, what the cash flow looks like, and what work they have done already on what they want to earmark their cash funds for. So if we already know what the cash is set aside to do, then it makes it very, very easy to invest the funds. So, if they're saying to me, well, those funds are set aside for a capital project, but we don't need it for 5 years, then we know that we've got an investment time frame of 5 years. Or if it's for, they want it to be for a scholarship fund, then we know that that might be invested in perpetuity, but we are only going to use the income that is generated off of that to pay for a scholarship. So it's sort of a fact-finding process that we go through with every school based on what their goals and objectives, and we can work through that with them. Generally, they have a very good idea of things that they want to do. If there has been fundraising activities occur, they generally, and with the fundraising, we find that they have a better outcome if they're telling people what the purpose is going to be for the funds that they're giving. So then if we can work with the timeframes and that purpose, it makes it very easy to put the investment plan in place.
Okay, excellent. And what's the most common barrier that you face when you're trying to advise schools on the best practice with their investments? What's the most common barrier to effective management of their cash reserves? What hurdles do you often find that you've got to try and get them over?
So absolutely, the most concern that the people on the board and the finance committee have is that they don't want to lose any of the money that's there. So they're either not taking any risk at all, or they're not taking enough risk.
I thought it would be that the more the reluctance that we want to be able to have access to it, but it's actually that the risk of if it diminishing in value is much higher. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
And having access to it is very, very easy. So even when you're thinking about the difference between a term deposit, and term deposits now a vehicle, they are very low risk, but you have to lock them away for a certain amount of time. So there is, a liquidity issue there, and even if you break them early, you have to give the bank 30 days notice that you'd like to do that. Whereas with more higher risk growth oriented investments, so if you're talking about shares traded on a stock exchange, they are more liquid. So if you sell a share on a stock exchange, the trading time frame is 3 days. You will be able to get the proceeds back, but it's just that you may not want to sell it at that time if the market has dropped down and you're going to get less for it. So it's, we can work around the liquidity issues, but it's, I suppose, having a negative return that is the biggest fear, and that is with growth investments. That is, I suppose, what you have to take on to be able to get the long-term high investment return.
So what sort of advice would you give to schools when you're trying to encourage them to raise their risk profile and to get buy-in from the stakeholders so they have a more effective cash reserve return?
So there's two things that I talk about. So inflation is one of them. So if you're taking no or very little risk with the investments, when you take inflation into account, you are actually going backwards and losing money. The other one is I try to equate the situation to maybe their own personal experience of saving for retirement with their superannuation accounts. So that's something that has a very long-term investment time frame. Everybody has their own super account, and one of the things that a large public office super fund would do, if someone doesn't take an investment choice, they do it for them. So in that sort of situation, they're looking at asset allocation where there's around 50% of growth investments in that type of portfolio. So if you can equate investing back to people's own personal experience so that they get a little bit of understanding about how things will work over the long term.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking about this topic, and let's really hope we can encourage schools to be a lot more effective with their cash surplus investment policies and planning. We're not keeping things under the mattress for a rainy day, and we're getting the most out of the funds that we've got for the benefit of the school. So absolutely love talking with you.
Thank you
for all the work that you're doing with the schools in this space, and we look forward to chatting in the future. Thank you for joining us.
Great. All right. Thanks,
Kym.
Kenton.
See you.
See you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Business of School podcast. We've enjoyed the conversation today and would love to have you join us for future episodes. Please hit the subscribe button and follow the links below to find more information and resources to support you and your school team. Until next time, keep being innovative, keep being awesome, and remember, there is always opportunity to improve on the journey. Thanks for connecting.